anniversary celebrations. Now, President Museveni sparked a phantom of debate when he described Amin's first mistake, or the former president of Uganda, Idi Amin's first mistake, as imposing himself on the country through military force in the 1971 coup. Now, we align minds for the discussion to digest the president's speech on Monday, and of course to see how much weight it does carry, how true the message was as he was rallying different leaders and religious leaders in the same regard. Now, with me in studio, I'm joined by retired Major Paula Awich, Director External Affairs, NRM. Good morning, retired Major. Yes. Good to have you, sir. And then with him, or alongside him, we have Joseph Ochieno, who is a political analyst, joining us again here on MorningAtNTV. A very good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us.
I am here primarily as the should-be president of Uganda People's Congress, but political analysis is part of me.
Okay. Well, and here we are. Speaking of the president, let's just start from there. Joseph, I'll start with you before I get to retired Major Paula Awich. The president's comments during the commemoration event, what came in your mind upon hearing some of the statements he made?
Yeah, first of all, it was unfortunate I wasn't in Muchwini. I was there last year. It's a very symbolic place for the peoples of this country. But that as it may, I must say also that as I was thinking Muchwini, of course you know that in the last 2 days the world, the African community particularly, is mourning the passing of the Reverend Dr. Jesse Jackson, who's a Martin Luther King protege group of civil rights activists. I was lucky to have met him at least a couple of times, including in one of the biggest rallies ever in London, and that is the anti-war campaigns in 2003, where the world was saying no to imperialist invasion and occupation of Iraq. That said, if you consider imperialism, you consider global polity, you consider the context in which we are discussing Idi Amin, and you consider that Idi Amin was actually an imposition on the people of the Republic of Uganda by foreign forces. That is something that many Ugandans don't know. Amin was imposed on this country by foreign forces and forced onto us, granted, militarily. When I was at Muchwini last year, I was looking at the trajectory of our history. And as I was having another conversation yesterday, I watched Winnie Mandela reflecting on CODESA, the talks that led to the democratic South Africa post-apartheid, and some of the unfinished businesses. But when I was considering that, I was also remembering that I came of age politically in 1976, that's quite some time ago, as a primary school kid. And part of the things that shook me at Nagongara Boys Primary School was the question of the Sharpeville massacre of young primary school kids, lest people like yourselves forget, in South Africa. And that, in a way, sparked and steamed up the process of campaigns for liberation struggles that eventually led to the end of apartheid, but apartheid is not over. Back into Uganda, back into Mr. Museveni's speech, I say, really, after even granting Janan Lugum a day for us to celebrate, to mark as citizens of the Republic of Uganda, it's almost like an NRA constitution that you would say, never again. So if never again that Idi Amin imposed himself in 1971, Mr. Museveni did not come to power in 1986 democratically. He imposed himself on the people of this country, together with their friends, the Okellos. The previous year, in 1985, they imposed themselves. Mr. Museveni went on to rule Uganda for 10 years, an imposition without the mandate of the people of this country. In 1996, 10 years later, they held an election in which political parties had hands in the bag. So that effectively has been in a position. And part of my problem is that since then to date, I'm wondering, where do we have this thing that power has sort of returned to the peoples? My good friend, Comrade Rich, we normally have these fantastic conversations around these issues and will give a very legalistic perspective. I am not point scoring. I'm simply saying that after Janan Luwum and Idi Amin, today, people, my friends in NRA would say, oh, they're no longer bodies on the streets. My friends will say they're no longer extrajudicial killings, but they're killings. I think about Mr. Museveni's own friend, Kizza Besigye. I think about the official opposition leader, Robert Kyagulanyi. Whatever the details, I'm not satisfied as an average citizen. And I'm thinking about some of the people who disappeared in the last election, the violence of the last elections. I'm simply saying that, well, if we have a Janani Luwum Day, whatever happens, whatever Mr. Museveni was saying, we need to have a closure so that we're able to have a conversation that takes us as a country forward, in which no life of the citizens of this country is lost, whatever the circumstances. And
let me get to retired Major Paula, which this is not the first time that President Museveni is blaming previous regimes of this level of iron hand governance. And there is also an argument over time that many of the political observers are saying he's pretty much turning into the exact previous regimes that he was speaking against.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, beginning from the statement in Mchwini, the home village of Janan and Luwum, I saw somewhere where the speech was divided into two distinct paragraphs. Paragraph 1 was talking about how Satan used the mean. Paragraph 2 was talking of the imposition, the illegal imposition. And my view was that paragraph 1 was not in dispute. It is true that the arrest of Luwum, even if Amin claimed he was doing treacherous thing, it didn't mean he should be killed the way he was killed. He had all the ample time to try him and see if he committed those offenses, and if he did, there are lawful ways even of execution. And for me as an advocate, even if you sentence my client to death by hanging, I will make sure I follow until I know that my client is hanged lawfully. Therefore, it is true that Satan used the mean to kill Luwum the way he did. So that is not in dispute. What appears to be in dispute is paragraph 2 about imposition, which I don't see any dispute. Because the imposition here is that Amin, on his own volition, took over power through a coup. No election, nothing. Now, somebody would say, and I think that is a point they try to allude to, that in 1986, you, President Museveni, came through an arm with a gun. It is true that in 1986, Legal Notice 1 wrested power from the then government to the government of NRM, headed by Museveni. That was a constitutional norm, it was done. But President Museveni, as I explained this, that he had given options to the political leadership then to talk a way of handling the political infrastructure of the country, and there was no option than fighting. And there's a difference between a protracted people's struggle with people's support, which gave birth to the People's Army, which had the kind of support that you had from the peasants, with the discipline of the army that you had. I have always repeatedly said that NRA was like a group of nuns, but would fight like lions. Because even a single digression against a civilian would earn you a firing squad. Therefore, the protracted people's struggle, which took 5 years, is different from a coup initiated by one person. Therefore, you can't link the imposition, as it is said, that you came also without voting. No, it did not come without voting, but everybody could see it was a popular struggle that took 5 years with popular support.
Okay.
Therefore, Museveni is right to say Satan used a mean, and his father right to say a means coup was illegal. And I like to differentiate that legal notice 1 in 1986 that brought Museveni to power is completely different from a one-man coup that on its own took over. The other one was a progressive struggle that involved people over years, and the popularity was seen and visible.
Richard Major, we're going to come back with the 1986, which was meant to be a liberation landmark for Uganda.
Allegedly. Allegedly.
And I think we have a counteraction from Joseph Ochieno here. But let's first head to Ibanda district. Today is Ash Wednesday. We need to see how the people in the district are preparing for the fasting season that kicks off today for the Christians. Of course, also yesterday, having cited the crescent moon, the Muslims have also started their fasting or their holy month of Ramadan today. Let's have a happy Ramadan season and also a happy Lent season for the Christians. As we get back to our conversation here, I want to return to Richard Major Paula, which 1986 was meant to be a liberation landmark for Uganda. And Joseph here says alleged, and his choice of words open room for our conversation here. When you look back at the reports we've had, the beatings during the elections and post-elections, some killings were also reported, abductions reported in the same regard. What is your thought in regards to the state of Uganda, and does it satisfy the struggles as someone who is a war veteran? Major.
The status perfectly does satisfy the reason for which we struggle. But as you may know, in a country of 45 million people, and in a state machinery of an army of 60,000 or so, with the intelligence system and the police of that similar number, you definitely know that there is bound to be interactions and alternations, especially among state operatives and the population, including areas of crowd control, because the biggest problem we have is crowd control, particularly in electoral period. And therefore, like just in an army, I mean in a family, you don't expect to have a perfect family, not even a family of 3 people. So these challenges and the apparent contradictions that we hear, and it is good you put it reports. Reports means things that have not been confirmed. They are not ruling of courts. They are not, even if it was a finding of commissions of inquiry. Commissions of inquiry findings are not ultimate itself. What is ultimate is a court decision, at least in its governance. Therefore, in a society like this, there are bound to be such things. But what should guide us is institutional frameworks. Because even a country like Uganda, if you are to judge by outside, say by United Nations, you don't judge on individual occurrences, that this one has occurred, this one occurred. You judge a country by institutional frameworks. Are there laws in place? For example, even if you talk of the laws about the behavior of state agents like police, if police beat, if police break the legs, what is the institutional framework that a country addresses? And that is why I take you to the law of Human Rights Enforcement Act. This law was a private member's bill, which says if you're a police officer or a soldier and you break somebody's leg, in the past, if you take on such an officer, it would raise the defense of Attorney General. You go to Attorney General. Me, I was not doing my father's work. But because of the current adherence to human rights, they said you are personally liable. Therefore, all the occurrences that happens should be looked up in institutional framework. Why did the president assent to this law? Because it wouldn't have been a law till he signs. Therefore, the occurrences that happen in a society, the occurrences that happen in a country of 45 million, we can only be judged, even by outsiders, by institutional frameworks. But even if you go through the reports, there are various reports that indicates transformation, that talks to the fighting. In all aspects, you can cite one. For example, in education alone, did you know that before NRM, the constant requirement up to now is that for you to join a university, you need EE. You need 2 principal passes. Did you know how many people were failing to go to university just because there were no universities? Nothing. Somebody has even BC. You can't, because there was only one Makere. I'm mentioning this because I'm saying there's a list of indicators you can't go through. Not to mention that the life expectancy has gone from 34 to 67. Not to mention the infrastructure and all this. And the freedom that I can sit with comrade, I always call him my Congress comrade. Therefore, in summary to your question is that indeed, I'm happy the struggle happened. But I'm saying the occurrences, the reports that you are hearing, are reports that happen in a day-to-day governance of the state. But what should be done is to judge a country by, should that happen, what do you do?
But
should a soldier do this? What do you do? Should the police do this? What do you do? Are there institutional frameworks? Which they are there.
Retired Major, these things are happening.
Yes.
They are happening.
Yes.
And why are they happening again?
I have said they are happening because that's how I started with the width and the size of the population. I mentioned the size of the military. I mentioned the size of the police. I am saying in such institutions, it's difficult to police one by one. I'm saying it is difficult to police that you, Sergeant Tumusime, don't do this. You, Corporal Kello, don't do this. That's why I'm saying there should be institutional framework, and that is how you judge it. So, in other words, and that's why you always have, even in operation, there's what you call engagement rules of engagement. Because you know that should you deploy, not all will behave according to the way you have deployed. And therefore you have rules of engagement. So you should be judged by, if this thing happened, what institutional framework do you have to deal with it? And that is how the world sees us.
Joseph, Paula mentioned something about institutional frameworks, but I want us to also get back to the fact that, do you feel that the current state of Uganda is satisfying the struggles of those that went to the bush between 1980, 81, 80 until 86?
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I think if we decide to go back to the justification of the NRA war, you know, Lewum would be a saint severally, and many people will end up in Luzira. And, you know, talking institutional framework, it's just extraordinary, isn't it? Good you asked me. Idi Amin, actually, in 1971, knowing very well that he was about to be arrested, but he was supposed to return from the Commonwealth Conference in Singapore, where he was actually the spokesperson for anti-apartheid, lest we forget. And people didn't like it, so an arrangement was made to overthrow him, one. But number two, because of the economic emancipation of the people of this country. And three, because they dared forces in Congo that wanted to usurp the economic interests and the sovereignty of the people of Congo. So he was the bad man, so Amin comes to overthrow. But at least Amin came and just overthrew. In the NRA's case, they made double mistakes. In 1981, when NRA guys went to the bush, first of all, it was a treasonous act. You know, talk institutions, they were courts of law. Mr. Museveni didn't go to a court in Barara. He didn't go to a court in Mubende. You know, he went to Kabamba, you know, and confined the people of Luwero into a treasonous war. In any case, Comrade Which calls it a people's liberation struggle. So who are these people who were there in Luwero? Which Baganda are today the eminent names in the so-called liberation struggles? How many generals are there from the struggle, so-called struggles for NRA? It wasn't a struggle. It was, to call it a people's struggle is to link it to Tororo, my Tororo. I reject that. To link it to Gulus, to link it to Average Mbarara, to link it to Kabale. No, it wasn't a people's struggle. It was a usurpation of the powers of the people who had democratically elected the government in 1980. In any case, actually, the 1980 general elections, following the reports of what happened today in the last elections, was by and large possibly the last free and fair multi-party elections to have taken place in this country, if you compare everything else by the subsequent results. So it wasn't completely justified. But in any case, actually, even in the unlikely event that it was, and that's one of the reasons, Comrade Which, and to the leaders in NRA, coming very authoritative from the UPC, we've been arguing for the last 20 years that notwithstanding the terror, notwithstanding the atrocities committed in northern Uganda and across this country, we need to heal as a nation. But every other time when we need to go ahead and justify an apparent criminality in every sense, legal and otherwise, we make it worse. Because if you take on the education index, which is talking about people not going to university, the population of this country, granted, has multiplied 4 times. One of the most expensive things in this country is education. And I have families and friends who are struggling. I've got relatives who've got degrees, and they can't afford to take nearly 2 children to school because education is extremely expensive. Health is so expensive. Infrastructure that community is talking about. Him and I, we can discuss on air how we ended up here because of the choke of Kampala and infrastructure. These guys killed our rail systems, killed our train services, killed our airline services. Now you can see the bangles that Mr. Museveni claims is a revolutionary, and all of a sudden, well, he brings an incompetent woman to run a crooked airline, and now all of a sudden we're looking for some tired 80-year-old man to run an airline, which was an efficient Uganda airline. We can go on economic justification. There is no justification of whatever's happening today. To link it with the Idi Amin makes it worse. But my point is this. Whatever happened, when Janani Luwum Day comes, that day should really be a genuine public day for reflection. So it should be a day when we should reflect on our morals, we should reflect on our economy, we should reflect on our communities, we should reflect on our national cohesion, and it should not be a point-scoring event. Okay. Yes.
Gentlemen, we're running out of time, so I'm afraid I'm just going to
in this institutional framework.
Yes, in just a minute.
You see, I wanted to justify the response to institutional framework for state agencies in that one time European Union said the same thing. I challenge police. I said, do you try your officers? I want all the records of trial. Police sent me the officers, they are tried in police courts. I asked the army the same thing. They sent me a trial in court martial, including a soldier who killed in Makinde, one in a Rubaga. The trials in army courts are there to punish. And one was sentenced to 8 years. Incredible. One was sentenced to death for the military. So I'm saying institutional frameworks are there. The police courts are there to discipline police. The army courts are there to discipline the army. And this is the response to the challenges that you have as an institution.
As we're winding up, I want to pick just one comment from each one of you. Let me start with retired Major Paula Which. Do you feel we are going back to the times of Idi Amin in any way, as some of the political observers say?
Not at all. We are not at all. I think those who are saying that are really reading from another script. We are not. We have advanced and we are so progressive, so institutional, law governing, and the indicators are there. For example, one indicator in the case of Luwum, do you know that there's a cry that religious leaders are not biting enough on the government? That cry. But I told them,
because we saw one religious leader who was speaking like the woman who was arrested last year.
I told them why religious leaders are behaving like that. It's because of the lack of offense from government. When the government are not doing that, religious leaders cannot manufacture criticisms. It's like a dream. The criticisms of religious leaders is automatic. So when states are not misbehaving, then religious leaders lack what to criticize.
Joseph.
It is not that they don't want it. There's nothing.
Are we going back all things have changed.
There are certain things which are happening today which are far worse than what we saw in Idi Amin's time. By the way, I was lucky. In Amin's time, I was a primary school kid. And as I said, I don't know any sense of militarization that I saw in Nagonga of Tororo. I don't see any sense of militarization that I saw in Jinja, where I went to high school. I don't see any militarization in my Makere University, the Harvard of Africa, where I attended. And at the moment, it's just like a dungeon. It's like a war front. Today, in 2026, you know, some of the things are extremely things that never happened in Idi Amin's time. And as I said, our friends in NRA ought to come to the realities, use the spirit of lead, reflect, review, and apologize to this country, come together. Uganda People's Congress will create an enabling environment in which you have a national reconciliation so that we're able to build a possibility for our children not to see the mess we've seen under NRA and the mess we saw under Idi Amin.
Okay. We've got 2 minutes to 9 a.m. and that beats our conversation this morning. We're reflecting on Uganda's leadership and progress, and also taking back in regards to what the president revealed during the Janal Women Day celebrations in Kitgum district. My guests this morning have been having retired Major Paula Awich, who's the Director External Affairs, NRM, and Joseph Ochieno, a political analyst, and also a member of UPC. He says he was supposed to be the president. He should be the president of